Justice is supposed to be fair. When a crime is committed, investigators collect evidence, interrogate suspects and present their findings to the courts, but sometimes the system gets it horribly wrong. Innocent people are arrested, convicted and sentenced for crimes they never committed. Meanwhile, the real criminals remain free, often continuing their crimes for years or even decades. How does this happen? Is it flawed evidence, corrupt officials, racial or social bias? Or is it just a tragic twist of fate? Today we're exposing the most shocking cases where innocent people paid the price, while the true perpetrators walked away untouched. Stay with me until the end, because one of these cases took over 30 years to correct. And when the truth finally came out, it was almost too late. If you love true crime, subscribe now so you don't miss next Saturday's episode, where we uncover heists so genius they almost got away with it. In 1989, one of the most infamous wrongful convictions in American history unfolded in New York City. A young woman known as the Central Park Jogger was brutally attacked and left unconscious. The crime sparked massive public outrage, and the pressure to find culprits was immediate. Police quickly arrested 5 Black and Latino teenagers, ranging from 14 to 16 years old, and interrogated them for hours without lawyers or guardians. Desperate for answers, officers used coercive tactics, telling the boys they could go home if they just confessed. Under extreme pressure, they provided false confessions, often contradicting each other in basic facts. No physical evidence linked them to the crime. Their stories didn't align with forensic details, yet the confession tapes were played in court, and a jury found them guilty. The media sensationalized the case, portraying the teenagers as violent predators roaming the city. Politicians called for maximum punishment, the public wanted someone to blame, and these 5 became the perfect scapegoats. They were sentenced to prison, some for as many as 13 years, losing their youth behind bars. Meanwhile, the real criminal, Matias Reyes, who had already committed other similar assaults, remained free. He continued his crimes, evading capture for years. When he finally confessed in 2002, DNA testing confirmed that he alone was responsible for the attack in Central Park. For the Central Park 5, it was a devastating vindication. They were exonerated, but the trauma of wrongful imprisonment couldn't be erased. Their case exposed serious flaws in the justice system, revealing how coerced confessions, racial bias, and intense media scrutiny can converge to produce a tragic miscarriage of justice. In 1993, the town of West Memphis, Arkansas, was rocked by the brutal deaths of 3 young boys. Rumors spread that a satanic cult was involved, fueling local panic. Police arrested 3 teenagers, Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin and Jesse Miskelly Jr. Their alleged motive? A so-called satanic ritual. What evidence did authorities have? Virtually none. There were no eyewitnesses placing them at the scene, no credible forensic links. The prosecution leaned on Miskelly's coerced confession. He was a 17-year-old with learning difficulties who was interrogated for hours without a lawyer or parent present. His story changed repeatedly, contradicting basic details of the crime scene. Yet the jury believed it. Damian Eccles received the death penalty, singled out because of his interest in heavy metal music and occult literature. Jason Baldwin and Jesse Miskelly were given life sentences. The trial painted them as devil worshippers, despite zero physical evidence. For nearly 2 decades, supporters rallied to their defense, arguing that the real killer remained free. New forensic tests eventually revealed that none of the West Memphis Three's DNA was present at the crime scene. In 2011, they were finally released under an Alford plea, a legal maneuver allowing them to maintain their innocence while acknowledging that the state had enough evidence to convict again if a new trial took place. Although they walked out of prison, the real perpetrator of this crime has never been officially identified. The West Memphis Three story stands as a grim testament to how fear, hysteria, and flimsy evidence can send innocent people to prison. Imagine spending nearly half a century in prison for a crime you didn't commit. That was the reality for Richard Phillips, a Detroit man convicted in 1972 of a murder he had no part in. He was sent to prison based on one main witness who later admitted he had lied to get a lighter sentence for another crime. No physical evidence tied Phillips to the murder, but that single testimony sealed his fate. Decades passed, 45 years to be exact, while Phillips fought to prove his innocence from behind bars. Then came the accidental twist that saved him. Another individual, already in prison for a different murder, confessed that he had carried out the killing Phillips was accused of, and that Phillips had never been involved. This admission led to a re-examination of the case, and DNA evidence confirmed that Richard Phillips was never at the crime scene. In 2018, after spending more years behind bars than any other wrongfully convicted person in US history, Richard Phillips was exonerated. By then he was in his 70s, having spent most of his adult life in prison for someone else's crime. His story illustrates how a single lie can derail an innocent person's entire life, and how sometimes it takes a stroke of unexpected honesty or a slip-up for the truth to emerge. In 1984, a 9-year-old girl was found attacked in a small Maryland town. The crime horrified the community, and law enforcement needed a suspect quickly. Kirk Bloodsworth, a former Marine with no criminal record, was identified by eyewitnesses who claimed he resembled a suspicious person near the crime scene. Despite no physical or forensic evidence, Bloodsworth was convicted of the brutal act and sentenced to death. Eyewitness testimony was all the prosecution needed, even though multiple witnesses later admitted they might have been mistaken. Bloodsworth spent years on death row, awaiting a fate that could have ended his life for a crime he knew nothing about. Then, in 1992, DNA technology advanced enough for the Innocence Project to step in and test evidence from the scene. The results were clear. The DNA did not match Bloodsworth. He was innocent, the first death row inmate in US history to be exonerated by DNA evidence. The real perpetrator, however, remained unidentified for a time, which meant the true criminal was still out there. Bloodsworth's case sent shockwaves through the legal system, proving that capital cases can hinge on unreliable eyewitness accounts. His story became a turning point for organizations fighting to introduce DNA testing into more investigations. Even one flawed recollection can cost an innocent person their entire life, and Bloodsworth's exoneration highlights the fragile line between guilt and innocence in a justice system that is supposed to demand proof beyond a reasonable doubt. These cases prove one thing: the justice system isn't perfect. Innocent people have been convicted, real criminals have walked free, and sometimes even the most glaring errors aren't corrected until decades later, if at all. How many more individuals are sitting in prison at this very moment, paying for crimes they didn't commit? How many guilty parties are still out there knowing they've escaped accountability? From the coerced confessions of the Central Park Five to the decades lost by Richard Phillips, each story is a sobering reminder that mistakes and even deliberate wrongdoing can lead to devastating consequences for the innocent. Which of these cases do you find the most shocking? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe now so you don't miss next Saturday's episode, where we uncover heists so genius they almost got away with it. And always remember, justice delayed is justice denied, but sometimes one single truth can overturn a world of lies. Thank you for watching. See you in the next investigation.